From the heart of Austin, Texas, all the way up to the tippy top of Red Fan HQ, you're listening to Under the Tent, where we dig into the communication strategies, public relation moves, and brand positioning that actually moves the needle. Now, here's your host, Kathleen Lucente.
It's delightful to see you, Charisse, here at the Under the Tent podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Kathleen.
Yeah. Well, I actually have known Charisse quite a long time. And first of all, of course, she is the master of cybersecurity, and we're going to get into that. But I think what's most important is why don't we, let's give them a little flavor of how we know each other. So Charisse knew my husband before I knew him. And she knew him from back in the MIT days, which was great. And she also was at our wedding. I think that's the first time I met you. You were at our wedding.
And it was a great wedding.
Thank you. And then you actually came and visited us when we lived in Hong Kong.
Lifestyles of the rich and famous.
And we had so much fun. And then when my husband and I finally made the move to Austin, you were so generous while we were trying to decide, should we live in Austin, Texas, or should we live on one of the places on Mark's spreadsheet, that we had kind of made the spreadsheet trying to figure out where in the United States should we live. Charisse throws a party and she invites everyone from the head of a school that is here in town to tech wizards and everyone in her neighborhood. And they literally wrote in a notebook the top 10 reasons why the Lucentes should move to Austin. So we said yes. Thank you so much for locking us down, Charisse. I appreciate it. Here we are over 20 years later, and it's been a really smart move.
20 years, my goodness.
I know, it's crazy. So, when I think about you and your background, it's pretty interesting to think that you actually have you're like a double, triple threat, right? I mean, you've got an Italian background, so we're going to throw that in there too. But you have this incredible. You started with a CS degree from Berkeley, and then you had that law degree from UT Austin. What made you decide to pursue both? And then how does that dual lens change how you approach cybersecurity?
Yeah, I was a coder for a long time, and then I ended up running the engineering department for a small cybersecurity startup in the late 80s, and I was negotiating a contract with IBM and realized that the attorneys on the other side didn't know the difference between an operating system and a database. And I said, oh, somebody needs to go get a law degree because software is going to be big.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Yeah, that's a good way to kind of start thinking about how to weave these talents together, right? Yeah. So you've been in the information security since basically the 80s, it sounds like. And before most companies even had security teams, right, I would say.
Yep, it was back when it was mathematicians doing encryption if they couldn't get jobs as insurance actuaries.
Wow, that's incredible. And what, if you think about that, what would you say is the single biggest shift you've seen in how companies think about or fail to think about security today?
Oh goodness, that's actually a tough one because there's been a number of big adjustments. I mean, the first one, of course, was the internet. Just the fact that we could all become interconnected, that led to the development of key information security technologies like firewalls and intrusion detection systems. And after that, it was the World Wide Web, right. And now we have AI.
AI is doing some interesting things, right?
But, the internet is a pro and a con, right? It's designed to be open and accessible around the world, which means hackers can access it just as well as businesses can to use it to conduct their business.
Right. And we think about, now people are so excited about AI and employees are using it and probably, companies are scrambling to say what the rules are, set the rules. What are you seeing in that space right now? What are the concerns?
Yeah, AI is, first of all, the defense and offensive part of cybersecurity has always been kind of an arms race. The defenders have to defend 100%, and the hackers only have to find one tiny little vulnerability to sneak in. But we've certainly seen, the advent of hacking for money. We see threat actors like terrorist groups hacking for money. These are your ransomwares or your or ACH wire fraud types of hacks. And there's also then, nation state hackers that come in and, hack for secrets, like the Office of Personnel Management hack some 10 years ago was to get all that data. So if you are thinking about your risk associated with artificial intelligence, it's really an accelerant for the hackers. And we can talk about some examples about how hackers are using AI to accelerate.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I was reading that phishing attacks are up over 4,000% since ChatGPT was introduced, right?
Yep.
So that's a big one. You've got the Anthropic, basically, holding back on releasing because they realize there's some issues where that advanced model, because that 0 day, I don't think most people don't even understand what 0 day is.
The 0 day is just a bug.
Right.
It's an error in business logic or coding in software system or deployment. And they're generally things that made it through quality from the original manufacturer, whether that's Microsoft, Google, Amazon, whoever.
Right.
And if the hacker finds it first, then they can exploit it first. But it used to take about 22 days to code up the systems or the intrusion mechanisms that you would use to exploit that 0 day.
Okay.
With AI, certain cybersecurity experts are saying it's down to days, maybe hours.
Wow.
Yeah. So much faster turn. And of course, as a user of those systems, you're dependent on your vendor to provide you with a fix. And then you have to be able to deploy that fix. And if you're running on critical systems, you can't always just deploy a fix.
Right.
You have to test it first because it might break your entire system. And then all of a sudden your e-commerce site is down or your ability to transact with your partners is down.
Sounds like you need to be testing that all the time.
We've tried the industry has tried to make what we would call continuous vulnerability scanning and testing systems. It's not that easy. They're kind of heavyweight and they often can produce a lot of results that you have to go triage that end up being nothing.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that can be expensive. I mean, not all companies can afford to do that, right?
Most companies can't afford to do that.
When you think of a couple of examples, when you think about AI as the threat accelerant, whether it's in the shadow IT zone or something as big as, some of the bigger examples, what are the big scary things that we need to be thinking about?
Well, number one is Anthropic, but I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. But I'll just give you a flavor for the types of things that you can do with artificial intelligence that you couldn't before. So about a year ago, an engineering firm out of the UK that had a Hong Kong office, a phishing attack, so a false email went through asking one of the directors of finance to participate in a Zoom call. On that Zoom call, there were no humans. It was just AI avatars pretending to be executives in the company. Wow. Because of that call, the director sent out, I think it was close to a $50 million wire, and it was all fraud.
Amazing. Yeah. And so would you say were the deep fakes, were they faces of people that he thought he was speaking to?
It was a Zoom call.
Right? So he's like, oh, that looks like so-and-so, even if I don't work right next to them. This looks like the CFO of my company or what have you.
Exactly.
Amazing, right?
Exactly. So that's why we're going to talk when we get it. You have to go back to basics. So you could have solved that problem if you'd had dual authorization. One person initiates, another person approves.
Right.
Or if you'd had a out of band verification. Mm-hmm. So a shared secret.
Yes.
That the rest of the world doesn't know about that you use when you transact dollar amounts over X or Y.
Incredible. I mean, that's just scary. I mean, and I don't know how you ever get that money back.
I don't, I haven't seen details on that. There is, just for your U.S. business folks, if you do get wire frauded, there is the U.S. government, the FBI and the Secret Service has a clawback mechanism. You can actually claw back a wire. They have about a 70% success rate if you catch it within 3 days. So the very first thing to do is go to ic3.gov and report it, and then call your local FBI agent.
Amazing.
Like literally, don't try to triage it yet. Let your bank know, but don't try to triage it. Don't try to do anything else. Just
because you're losing time.
You're losing time. You're losing time. So
incredible.
It's ic3.gov is your friend.
Good to know.
And do the whole URL, because there are fake ic3.gov sites out there.
Good to know that too. My goodness, there's all sorts of things to catch us up. So when we think about the human element here, right? Because we've got, humans are just using AI, right? Half the company might be using AI in different ways. And, if it's a high growth company, a middle market company, they might not have the systems in place to even know who's doing what. So what can we do? I mean, you've got, 60% of breaches are caused by human error,
right?
Probably more. What can we do?
I think, the most important thing for an organization of any size is to make sure you have a thought leader that's talking to the organization about using tools. I mean, we've been through this before. We went through this when websites first came out.
Right.
Everybody was standing up their own website or standing up their own SharePoint, and they weren't necessarily configuring it for safety, privacy, and security. So the same thing, if you're a company and you want to use AI, define your use case, discuss it, make sure you understand it, and then only use authorized AI tools.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let shadow IT proliferate in your organization. And there are tools that are coming out that will monitor for off the record AI tools being deployed, so you can do that. Or more importantly, just really talk to people, because most people aren't intentionally malicious or intentionally careless. They just don't understand. You hear and read about AI is so great,
right?
But you don't understand what the downside is. So that's step one.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I remember being on a panel, or talking to some folks on a panel just a couple of years ago, and it was a bunch of CTOs, and one guy had just shown up at a company and realized that when he did an analysis, there was something like 150 tools being used across the company that were not verified. Everyone had been given permission to kind of use whatever they wanted. And boy, he had a mess to clean up and looked like the bad guy, because he was trying to put systems in place. So that education internally seems really, really important.
Yeah, I think we really have to shift away from the, once a year PowerPoint questions for cybersecurity, and really make cybersecurity more of something you think about all the time. One approach that I've seen some mid-market companies use is to identify cybersecurity ambassadors within your organization. So it's just someone who has an aptitude or a curiosity about it. So people feel like they have a peer that they can go ask questions of. And then you don't have to go looking like you're trying to find the IT guy or the cyber guy. You have a peer you can discuss it with if you see something.
Yeah. As an owner of a PR firm, one of the things I would say in the last 2 years, because we do a lot of crisis comm work, the things that we're seeing in the B2B tech space are, it can be anything from education tech to fintech, where you would think these things are strong. The hack that gets through and holding customer data hostage. This has also been a big one where people have had to, call in specialists and spend quite a bit of money that they weren't planning on.
Yeah.
What are you seeing there?
Yeah, ransomware. It's big and it's growing. And we've seen targets over the last sort of 24 months. We've really seen them targeting organizations that have personally identifiable information that are subject to regulatory compliance, like healthcare.
Yep.
And we just with the Iran war, we had the Stryker medical company get attacked, and they literally wiped out the operating systems and data on 200,000 devices.
Amazing.
One command.
Wow.
One command.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. So how do you deal with that? So most people, ransomware is actually, it's kind of a long game. So the hackers have to get into your system first.
Right.
So they've figured out some way to get into your system, whether it's an unmanaged external device, you see that a fair amount, or it's the same human vulnerability of accepting a payload that allows the hacker to get that malware in there.
Yeah.
And it's a tough one. Honestly, the first thing you do is pick up the phone and call your outside general counsel, and the second thing you do is pick up the phone and call up your insurance carrier and make sure you have insurance coverage before it happens.
Right. I mean, that's kind of an amazing challenge. I think a lot of people don't imagine they're going to be in that position, right? So actually having the right lawyer in place, having the right, and even understanding your insurance.
Yeah, you need to do that before as
Right.
much as possible. So whenever your annual reviews are, you really should be thinking as you're renewing your insurance, or just, maybe quarterly even go review your insurance and make sure you're covered, see what the risk trends are associated with your particular industry.
Absolutely. Anything else you want to talk about on the Anthropic side?
Oh, so Anthropic. I'll give you an example. There was a startup doing some type of a car rental company. They had deployed an agent, and it wiped out their production database.
Not good.
No, instruction error, coding error, these things happen. So we have to really be careful about what and how we use automation. These, whether it's a computer use agent simulating user interactions, or it's an agentic AI bot that you're using, that you're allowing to send emails on your behalf or schedule meetings on your behalf. We have to look carefully at those permissions. That's a general concern. The tool we use in cybersecurity is called privilege access management.
Okay.
But it's a big, amorphous, complex part of your organization, not usually well managed and never well audited. But if you're talking about deploying autonomous agents, you really need to go look at your privilege access management. Case in point, Microsoft created a new identity role for agents, and they just had to pull back and fix it because that role could escape and take access to privileged users and privileged user roles. So we're still learning how to do this.
Yeah, you could almost basically unleash something that causes destruction to your own company.
Oh yeah.
So it's not even outside. It's you've done it to yourself by not really understanding. Yeah, that's a huge one.
Yeah.
I mean, I was talking to someone the other day about kind of when you want to use AI, and a lot of times the people say, well, I launched this thing and it's not even working, but they didn't get the systems in place and optimize, and then they kind of skipped steps, right? Including this kind of control and understanding permissions and that kind of thing. So there's definitely, that's a whole other ball of wax, I can imagine.
Yeah, and remember, go back to your use case. What's the purpose for deploying this agent?
Right.
If it's to help your executives manage their inboxes, great. Make sure you've got rules around whether the agent can send, or whether it has to be reviewed by an administrator first, and make sure that your executive's inbox isn't running around with admin permissions, right? So
confidential information, tons of confidential.
There's a lot of confidential information. I do feel like I am very hopeful for data loss prevention. That I think that LLMs in particular might actually improve on that, but we're not to that point yet. So we're deploying the actor before we have the guardrails.
Well, when I think about mergers and acquisition and board exposure, this is kind of our clients are constantly, thinking about, we're about to do a merger and acquisition, and you've got to get your house in order on both sides. And now you're taking these two technology platforms and putting them together, two cultures and putting them together. I would say 40% of acquirers still do not treat cybersecurity as a critical in M&A due diligence, which
only 40%.
Yeah,
I would think it was worse than that.
I was reading about this. I was reading about how the Marriott inherited a year-long breach from Starwood, and Verizon almost lost the Yahoo deal as a result of this. What do you think PE firms and strategic acquirers need to be doing in terms of due diligence that they're not doing now?
This is a sad commentary on the state of M&A. You know, we spend all this time doing due diligence on the legal side, the contract sides, on the financials, on, you know, the critical employees.
Correct.
But we don't do it for IT and cybersecurity, right? It's just like, oh, what are you using? Oh, it's Microsoft, or it's Google, or it's Amazon. Oh, well, how are we going to integrate that?
Right.
We don't look at what were the practices that organization had. And in fact, we do more. There's probably more auditing done on third-party suppliers than there is on the target of our acquisition.
Yeah.
And it's not rocket science, Kathleen. It's just blocking and tackling.
Yeah.
You take your same third-party due diligence questionnaire and use it, but don't do just a paper audit.
Right.
Do real, just simple, small, targeted testing on live systems.
Yeah.
We do something for risk management called tabletops. These are exercises. Tabletops can be working through your processes, or they can be actual live instances. Go get a tabletop company and have them run a live tabletop exercise against that company that you're targeting to acquire.
Fantastic.
It will turn up something, and you will be better off for it.
Right. I mean, this is like, you know, there's so many headaches after M&A. You're celebrating, but there's still so much to get done in integration, and you don't want to have surprises.
Right.
You know, or something take the entire investment down. Right.
Right. And the second sort of probably fairly easy thing to do that I don't see done often enough is just do a cybersecurity vendor checklist. You know, side by side, what are they using? What are you using for these core critical functions?
Right.
How easy, because this is where it happens too, how easy is it going to be for us to migrate to a single pane of glass? Or are we going to make the decision not to?
Okay.
And maintain separate and isolated instances and using separate and different tools?
Eyes wide open.
It's not hard work to do. It's just not on most M&A due diligence checklists. I mean, you get it sometimes if you're in a regulated industry,
Right.
but you don't. But it should be on everybody's checklist.
I mean, I think about this, you know, when I think about like when you're advising on a deal, what are the red flags that tell you the target company does not actually know the state of their own security? I mean,
nobody knows the state of their own security, really, because it's changing all the time.
right.
The threat landscape is an externality you can't control. We still, you know, it's getting much better, but the ability to synthesize down the state of your risk in IT and cyber has always been an industry challenge. Either we go to one extreme where we're trying to do these mathematical models based on probabilities, or we try to use, you know, red, yellow, green. But it's never accurate. So go back to a risk management approach. If I have an 80% confidence that I'm this close, is that good enough? And how do I ensure for that unknown risk or that 20% that 20%? You're never going to be perfect.
Right. But you need to have eyes wide open on it. Right.
And know where your risk tolerance is. And then again, you can transfer that risk. You can ask for a holdback. You can insure for it. There's many other tools. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Right. So the SEC now requires disclosure on whether boards have cybersecurity expertise, and shareholder derivative lawsuits are citing inadequate oversight. If you're a director without a technical background, what are you actually obligated to do or know?
Yes. So this is an area of law that's been really evolving. We had the cybersecurity risk disclosure and incident disclosure requirements come out about 2 years ago.
Yep.
So you have to file an 8K. And I will say organizations are struggling with how to do this. Like, who's responsible for that disclosure? Who's responsible? How often do you have your chief information security officer report to the board?
Correct.
I think, in my opinion, the things that I've seen that work the best is if cyber is a risk for your organization, and CFOs know how to do risk, right?
Yeah.
They know how to do risk. They've been stuck with this rule for 20 years since we had, the big Enron fall back. So ask your CFO, how do you feel about this? How would you quantify or characterize this risk? And then go to your team and say, do you agree or not? How do we bring this to the big board on a regular basis and come up with a methodology? You don't have to have the core expertise in an individual independent director, but they need to have access. Someone needs to be assigned it, and they need to have a direct access either to the CFO or the CISO or both.
That makes good sense.
Yeah.
That's good.
And build those direct personal relationships.
I think it's also really interesting to think about when you're joining a board, understanding what you're supposed to know.
Exactly.
And what you're going to be held accountable
Yes.
to and the laws and how they've changed.
Exactly. If you're coming on to a big board and you need to ask those questions.
Yeah,
who's responsible for this part of the risk? Who's responsible for this part of the risk? We have our audit committees, we have our compensation committees that are separate independent committees. We still don't really have a cyber IT risk committee. Some organizations do, but not most.
That's interesting. Yeah. So if a CISO gives the board a quarterly green light report and 6 months later there's a massive breach, does that report protect the directors or does it make things worse?
We don't, to my knowledge, we don't have a case on that exact scenario. But I do think, so there's the general rule, the general legal rule. It's called the business judgment rule.
Okay.
So if, as the board, you're receiving these reports and you have a genuine belief that the CISO is competent and they're not, playing hide the ball or intentionally misrepresenting, then I think you're fully protected because you are entitled to rely upon the core expertise of the organization. And, and it could have been true. Remember, this is such a time, things change very quickly. It could have, it only takes one mistake to allow a hacker in, compared to having to defend 100% of the time.
Well, I bring this up because one of the things that, I've talked to quite a few people about is this idea of, do you understand the insurance you have? And, where does willful ignorance, or what I would call the willful ignorance trap fall, right? Because, I was reading that nearly 40% of cyber insurance claims were denied in 2024. So from your legal practice and background, what is the most common scenario where a company thinks they're covered and then they find out they're not?
Yeah, the biggest challenge is the exclusions, right? So you think you have insurance and coverage for, cyber risk, cyber insurance, but then you've got to go really look at the exclusions. And more and more, so like ransomware is now specifically called out. You have to have a specific type of coverage for ransomware.
Okay.
If you have to look at phishing, you have to look in very carefully to make sure it covers the broad range of different types of phishing attacks, type of squatting versus, and because they're so good now. You used to be able to say things like, oh, look at that spelling mistake. This is clearly a fish, right? With AI now, they're so good.
Oh, yeah.
And they will personalize them to you. They know your name. I get them too. And also they come in via text.
Yes.
And
that's really creepy.
It is. And sometimes you don't know if your phone is connected to Wi-Fi to your corporate infrastructure and you get a fish on your phone, it can move from your phone.
Right.
So we've got all of these additional risks that we have to look at, but you've really got to have somebody who understands the exclusions and make sure that you're covered specifically for the risks in your industry.
So carriers are asking CEOs to sign affidavits attesting that controls are in place.
Correct.
But they do not actually verify this in most cases. So are executives signing things they can't really back up?
So this is one area that has improved on the insurance industry side. It used to be like these simple little questionnaires, check. Now they're really more like what you would see in a third-party assessment, risk assessment.
Okay.
So the challenge here is if you, as the CFO or the CEO who's attesting that this checklist is correct, if it's wrong, they can use that to deny coverage.
Wow. Yeah,
so what I recommend is use actual data. Don't just hand the checklist off to your CISO or their team or your risk management team. Say, go run this checklist as if it were a third-party audit.
Got it.
And so we're not just going from our memory, but we're actually validating. You only have to do it once a year. It's not that big of a...
But put the proof there.
Yeah, we've always had, our scanning tools. One of the challenges is that they scan, they tell you things, then you have to go back and figure out, is it correct? Do I have a compensating control somewhere else?
Right.
Did it actually get through to the point where it could be a destructive test?
Right.
So the same thing with that cybersecurity insurance checklist. Run it like a real audit.
That's good. That's really, really good. There's almost a pervasive incentive at play. If you do not audit, you do not find problems, you do not have to disclose. Is that what is actually really happening across the industry, or is that not that ignorance kind of thing?
No, I don't think so. I don't, the ignorance is bliss, and the ignorance as a defense really doesn't fly anymore. We've always had the reasonable person standard.
Yeah.
So the reasonable CISO, that if you're, especially if you're a publicly traded company as a CISO,
right.
I would never do that
of
because
course.
there is, under the new 8K rules, direct liability for a CISO
right.
from an SEC investigation. They've moved up. CISOs have moved almost into the same situation that a CFO did after Enron, right?
That's
they have
true.
to attest and certify. We haven't had the one case that we had under those rules actually was pre the new 8K disclosure rule, and it was, in my opinion, a poorly chosen case to make a test case out of. It was SolarWinds.
Okay.
But they were vulnerable to a nation state attack.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and it's like, I'm sorry, nobody can defend against a nation state attack. Maybe the NSA, but really because the cost to defend at that level is prohibitive from a business perspective, right? So we still always have to go back to that business judgment rule.
Right.
Is this commercially reasonable? Does it make sense? But you cannot hide behind, gee, I just didn't know. That doesn't fly at all.
Correct. Yeah.
At all. And by the way, if you know, you can make choices. Like you could say, oh, let's put in a compensating control for that risk, or let's insure against that risk.
Right.
I would absolutely want to know if I was a CEO or a CFO. I would want to know.
Right. So, if you think about a company right now that is, they're getting their B round or their C round, so they're not a public company, and, they've got a CTO and they probably don't have a CISO, and what are the steps that that CEO should be asking his C-suite to take? Like, what do we do right now? We've just gotten the B round or the C round. We've got a little bit more money to be spending. We're building the next version of our product. We're a fintech company or something like that. What would you be advising them?
And that's a really good question. If you're not ready to bring someone in-house to do this, or even if bringing that, because CISOs are expensive.
They are
very expensive. My advice would be look at your core differentiators. What are your core go-to-market or product or service differentiators? If your CTO is comfortable, protect those if they're software. If it's manufacturing, you need to get in a specialized cybersecurity vendor to protect that. But I would say stay away from trying to do it all in-house and go hire a managed security service provider, and one that is recommended by your peers in the industry, because they all have slightly different flavors.
Right.
But don't try to do it yourself.
Right. And where do you think that the AI rules of the road should live? Do you think it sits with HR, with the tech team?
Yeah.
Are you seeing kind of people not ownership? Where does the ownership stand?
That's a big challenge. And you do have to be careful about the legal posture too, especially if you're in HR, right? New York has already promulgated a law that says you can't make certain AI decisions without human in the loop.
Yeah.
So I think it goes back to that use case.
Yes.
And, maybe a small little committee that strategizes around it. What's my use case? What are my legal or compliance risks associated with that? What are my technical risks?
So looking ahead 2 to 3 years, what's the threat that's not getting enough attention right now?
Oh my goodness. It's probably our tech debt. Our software tech debt. I think people are becoming very aware of it now. As you said, Anthropic pulled back the release of Mythos so they could give access to critical infrastructure players, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Firefox, banks, government, so they can go through and run checks against their own critical systems that they're providing. But remember, it's the legacy systems which have all the tech debt, which we can't always fix. Apple just went and did a pushback all the way back to iOS 18 because the bug was so critical. There's a ton of tech debt out there in our legacy systems. So if you need it, you can't change it, put some really good cones around it.
That's awesome. Charisse, thank you so much. How should people reach out to you, and what do you want to be doing more of?
Oh, I would love to help people who are dealing with these questions, right? I'm available on LinkedIn. You can hit me up there. You can always ask Kathleen to introduce us since we've known each other for so long.
That's right.
But yeah, I'd be, happy to help anybody who has questions about cyber. Really, I'm passionate about it.
You are incredible. Thank you so much for spending time with me today up here in this little nook at the top of the Red Fan office. It's a pleasure to spend time with you.
It's great to be here, Kathleen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's all for this episode of Under the Tent. And hey, if this one got you thinking, do us a favor, share it with someone in your network who needs to hear it. And join the conversation on our social channels. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And for a deeper dive into what Redfan can do for your brand, head on over to redfancommunications.com. Until next time, stay curious, stay ahead, Redfan.